Welcome to Betting with Benny on the FTN Network, sponsored by FTN Bets. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and today we're going to talk about a special three-game Turkey Day slate here. We'll have another video coming out later on in the week that'll go over the games on Sunday, but I wanted to get this one out early because we do have a nice three-game slate that we can talk about for Thursday. So let's get into it. So the first game we're going to talk about here today is the Houston Texans taking on the Detroit Lions. That's going to be the early game here on Thanksgiving. As we can see here, the Texans are 2.5-point favorites, 1.5 over on FanDuel with a little bit of juice to the upside. The Lions getting 2.5 over on DraftKings, 1.5 over on FanDuel with a little bit of juice to the downside there. Houston is 3-7. They're 3-7 against the spread. They're 5-5 to the total here. They did beat New England last week, 27-20, in a pretty interesting game. They started the week out as a 2-point favorite or so in that game, and then it swung to being a 2 to 3 point underdog, and they wound up not only covering but winning the game outright at 27-20. Looked pretty good doing it. So when I put my numbers together for this game, I have Houston neutral field about 1.5. So with this game being at Detroit, this should be about a pick 'em in this game. So there is a little bit of value on the Detroit side of it. I got to be honest with you guys. I'm not really willing to do it. Recency bias might play into this a little bit. And the thing that's going to be more important is really going to be the injury stuff for the Detroit Lions here. So let's talk about the Lions side real quick. The Lions are 4-6, 3-6-1 against the spread, 6-4 to the over. And they're coming off a 20-0 loss at Carolina. Now, we've been picking on the Carolina defense all year long, as has every offense that's played against them. So for you to not be able to put up any points against the Carolina team is a huge red flag for me in this situation. There's a lot of guys on this offense that are banged up right now, and that's really what the problem is. I mean, DeAndre Swift was out for that game. They've been without Kenny Golladay, I think, for at least 2 games at this point. So we really have to see if any of those guys are playing. If those guys are not playing, I don't think it's crazy to look at this as a game where you kind of want to be on the Houston side at -2.5 if you can get them under a field goal. If all those guys are playing, though, like I said, the number that I have on this game is actually basically a pick 'em. So, there is value on the Detroit side. Do I want to bet it? No, I actually really don't want to touch it. Again, if those guys are playing, maybe we can revisit the money line here because that would probably be the way to go, +112. You're getting a home dog on the money line. If they have their whole team, it's kind of interesting here because even if you look at the DVOA rankings for these two teams, Houston's offense is 15th, Detroit's offense is 14th. So technically, Detroit's a little bit better. You look at the DVO rankings for the defense, Houston's 28th, Detroit is 25th. So Detroit is slightly better on both sides of the ball, but you can see why I would have this game as a pick 'em. I mean, these two teams are basically identical to each other if you're looking at the numbers here. But again, a lot of that has to do with if the offense is going to be healthy here for the Lions. If it's not going to be healthy, I understand it. If they are healthy, though, I do think there's a little bit of value on the Detroit side here. So getting a home dog on the money line at plus money, that would be something that I might be interested in here. So we'll see how the injury stuff works out, but that's the way I'm looking for the first game. Now, the second game in the middle of the day here, we got the Washington football team taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys, 2.5-point favorites in this game. This is one of the toughest ones for me to kind of break down for you guys. So let me just go over the numbers, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts on it. Washington is 3-7, 4-4-2 against the spread, 4-5-1 to the over. They're coming off a win last week. They did just beat the Cincinnati Bengals 20-9. Joe Burrow getting hurt somewhere in the middle of that game right there. I think it was around the beginning of the third quarter or so. So they did wind up playing the second part of that game, basically with the backup quarterback who really wasn't able to do much for them. The other side of this game, Dallas is now 3-7. They're 2-8 against the spread, although they did win their last 2 games against the spread against 2 very good teams too in Pittsburgh and Minnesota. They are 5-5 to the over, so basically playing even to that. Like I said, they're coming off a win against Minnesota, 31-28. Andy Dalton was the quarterback in that game, and it's really tough to kind of look at some of these Dallas numbers and get too much out of it. I mean, they're 27th on offense DVOA. Now, that's really, really bad. But early in the season, they were one of the best offenses in the league when Dak Prescott was there. they looked better with Andy Dalton than they did when they had Ben DiNucci or who was it, Garrett Gilbert or Cooper Rush or all these other guys that they were throwing out there. So they're somewhere in between what they were with Dak Prescott and what they were with like Ben DiNucci and Garrett Gilbert as the quarterback for them, which makes them really tough to kind of gauge because we don't have enough of an Andy Dalton sample to really know how good this team is with Andy Dalton. I mean, Andy Dalton was a serviceable NFL quarterback. He wasn't going to win you a Super Bowl by himself, but at the same point in time, he has won a lot of games, has started a lot of games, does understand how to read defenses. I mean, it's not like they're throwing some rookie out there who's never been under center, never been in pressure situations. So, like I said, the offense is somewhere between the extremes of the Dallas offense with Dak Prescott and the extreme bad that we saw when Ben DiNucci was under center. The defense is still pretty bad, even though it's played better. They were 20th ranked DVOA. I don't know if that number is going to move up. It doesn't account for last week with the Minnesota Dallas game because it is Sunday night that I'm putting this video out here. On the other side for Washington, I mean, Washington's offense, one of the worst in the leagues, ranked 30th DVOA, averaging under 20 points a game. They did actually crack 20 last game against Cincinnati, so that was a little bit above average for them. Their defense is nasty, though, as Cincinnati and Joe Burrow found out last week. Their defense is actually ranked 7th. So this is a team that could make things a little bit tougher on Dallas. But again, it's very tough to gauge how good Dallas is with Andy Dalton on such a small sample size here. The number that I come up for in this game, I have this game as a pick 'em on a neutral field. So when you factor in home field advantage, you're probably looking at like a point and a half on the Dallas side. So it's a little rich for my blood at 2.5. But again, and not enough that I'd be willing to go onto the Washington side. You basically have two backup quarterbacks here. And this is what's interesting about backup quarterbacks. Like Andy Dalton is probably the best backup quarterback in the league, a guy who's been around, who's been a starter, all that stuff. But he's a much bigger drop off from Dak Prescott than Alex Smith, who is also a guy who had been a starter, even though he's been out of the league for a while. But Alex Smith could be as good, maybe even better. Basically, they've looked better the last couple of weeks with him under center than they ever did with Dwayne Haskins under center. So even though you have two backups here, I actually bump up Washington a little bit for having Alex Smith as quarterback and actually bump down Dallas despite having the best backup quarterback in the league and Andy Dalton being out there for him. Like I said, I have this game at Dallas -1, -1.5, somewhere in there. So I really have no bet on it with these numbers here right now. The last game we're going to talk about here, Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the one that after you eat all your turkey, this is going to be the late game at night. A lot of you are going to struggle to stay awake for it. I'm going to have about 5 cups of coffee and a couple espressos myself to make sure I stay awake for it because this is a game that I do really want to see. You look at this game right here. You got Baltimore, who's 6-4 right now. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. They lost them to Pittsburgh. They lost to New England. They lost to Tennessee in the basically in the last month here. They're 4-5-1 against the spread. They're 4-6 to the over. And it's really interesting this year. Baltimore last year was that like dominant offense that went out there and just kind of rolled everybody. And they had a solid to above average defense that was shutting down most teams and struggled a little bit against some of the good opponents that they had. This year, though, the offense is only ranked currently like 24th DVOA, which is really, really bad. But the defense is the 6th ranked defense DVOA, which is very, very good. And that's really what's kind of been helping them this year. Also, why we see them 4-6 to the over this year with 6 unders, 4 overs, because this year they have a good defense and a bad offense, whereas last year they had a great offense and a, serviceable defense here. The other side of this game, you got Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh still undefeated, sitting at 10-0, one of only a handful of teams that have done that in the past. They're 8-2 against the spread. They're 5-4-1 to the over. I mean, this is a very consistent team. The offense is middle of the pack, 16th DVOA. They've scored at least 24 points in every game that they've played. The defense is one of the best in the league, currently ranked number 2 DVOA going into week 10. They've only allowed more than 24 points in one game all season. They've allowed 24 once or twice. They had one game earlier in the year against the Philadelphia Eagles that they gave up 29. And everybody else that they played, they've kept to 24 or less. So if your worst game scoring is 24 and the most points you've given up except for one game is 24, you can see why this team is 10-0 right now. I have Baltimore and Pittsburgh currently number 3 and number 4 in my power rankings, with Pittsburgh having a slight edge here at number 3. So on a neutral field, I would have Pittsburgh about half a point better. when you factor in the fact that they're going to be home here, you're probably looking at like a 1.5 to 2 points would be the number that I have here on the Steelers. So again, at -3 on both sides of it, I guess there's a little bit of a lean to the Ravens if I had to pick a number, taking the +3 here. But I got to be honest with you, I don't really feel very comfortable with that. Like I said, the Ravens offense to me just doesn't look like the Ravens offense that people were trying to figure out how to stop last year. Lamar Jackson is not as explosive. It makes it a lot easier to defend them now when you kind of make him a pocket passer. As a pocket passer, he's a average NFL quarterback. When he's also running the ball, though, and the way you have to defend them, the linebackers kind of have to spy. You can't do a lot of stuff. You wind up with a lot of one-on-one for his pass catchers. It's a much more dynamic offense, and we just haven't seen that this year. Baltimore's been winning games this year by doing enough on offense and letting their defense kind of shut people down. I don't know if this defense is going to be able to shut the Steelers down. Slow them down, yes. Shut them down, probably not. And then when you factor in the fact that the Pittsburgh defense has been making people look really, really bad on the offensive side of the football, I just don't know. I think the Ravens are going to struggle to score points here. If you ask me right now if I wanted to put a play on this game, I think the under would probably be the way that I go. Not really all that interested in the sides here. Again, you're getting the Ravens at +134, +135. Not really a huge fan of that. I do think this is going to be a close game. I do think it's going to be entertaining. At the end of the day, I do think the Steelers are going to win, though. So, if you ask me to pick something, like I said, I don't really have anything here except for the under in this game because I do think that Ravens team is going to make it tough on the Steelers, and I think the Steelers defense is going to make it even tougher on the Ravens. And there you have it for the 3 games on the Thursday Thanksgiving slate. From our family over at FTN, we want to wish your family a happy holiday. However you guys are celebrating it this year, whether you're getting together or just doing it over a Zoom call. Everybody make sure you be safe, have a lot of food, and think of all the things that you could be positive and thankful for this year. We will have another video coming out later on in the week that's going to go over the Sunday games. So make sure you look for part 2 of Betting with Benny on the FTN Network, sponsored by FTN Bets.